Okay, so this is building on earlier books and books conversations, particularly one with Paul Moon recently on nature, and turning to Foucault. And that in turn is to do with conversations that I'm having on the internet. And thank you very much to everybody, including a certain person north of Sydney. Very interesting to go back to Foucault. And I think it also fits with work that is being talked about and done with respect to the late 70s. And I have work in process reviewing an inaugural from 1977. So the reading at that time, I was at Oxford at that time, was very much to do with the French. We liked, I particularly loved Foucault. I loved his work. The Order of Things, I really got stuck on the Order of Things. And I've tried to preface this talk with The Painting Last Men and Us, which of course is a key, a key work in the Order of Things. And one of the things about that painting, of course, is the multiplicity of viewpoints, of there not being simply one locked in perspective, but several happening at the same time. So I wanted to spend some time today on three books, or three works really. The first is The Archaeology of Knowledge, which is an interesting book, but it's not really the book that I like of Foucault's. The book that I like, as I've said, is The Order of Things, and that refers to a form of archaeology. And if we look at the social sciences in that sense, but if we look at the other work, the third piece, it's the 4-volume work on sexuality. And I've been talking about the idea of the Victorian period and what was going on underneath the Victorian veneer, so to speak. And if we come to Paul Moon and the last piece on books and books, and the discussion of nature and the way Paul was talking about being reinvigorated by nature. And I responded to that, and of course, there's quite a noteworthy part of that talk where Paul Moon says that the inner nature in Peter Cleave is being released, which struck me as remarkable. But there's very much a sense of and both I'm trying to strain, I guess, to find a connection between the two philosophers. Other people might not strain, but when I thought about it, it seemed to me that we were talking about individuality to a large extent. And of course, Foucault is very big on that, and the Order of Things is really to do with people discovering their own selves, and the idea of the emergence of man and the table, the episteme breaking, so that instead of people being part of a structure, people started to be able to develop their own structures, and that runs through his work quite extensively, especially the work on sexuality, and that gets us into another whole area which I'm not going into today. But obviously, you have queer theory being very taken, I guess, by Foucault's work, the idea of sexuality being socially constructed, the idea of a person being able to have their own sexuality is really important to him, and very important, I think, in terms of our generation, the generation that came through after the Second World War. Foucault was really just verbalizing what people were saying, and it took him a while. It took 4 volumes. The thing is 4 volumes long, and it's not something, as I say, I want to talk about, even though I am, because it really is extensive, and there will be other people out there listening and watching this who know much more about it than I do. But coming back to the book that I like, which is The Order of Things, one of the reasons that I wanted to do this show today is because we've been talking quite extensively with Paul Moon and others not about Nietzsche, but about the pre and post contact period in New Zealand. That is before the coming of the European to New Zealand and after. And of course, in my own writing, I've talked about Foucault in terms of one episteme giving something to another, and so forth and so on. That there were two epistemological frames involved, and there's so many ways to look at that. But I think Paul's issue is that this must not be cast in stone. That the idea of a pre-contact period, which is different to the post-contact period, and these things having been concretized in certain ways, is actually letting us down. That we need to have much more fluidity and much more sensitivity, really, to the two periods, and blocking one in one frame and blocking another, so to speak, in another. I'm talking about blocking something out in an art sense. In another frame is really, really not on. So that leads us to why we should be looking at Foucault. And I want to close here because this is not meant to be a long spiel. Because I believe we should be looking at Foucault in terms of epistemological change. That's my angle on him. And I think that we could well, in the post-plague era, the post-coronavirus era, be reframing a lot of things. And I think that there's certain things that I haven't mentioned today that Foucault was talking about. 1789, the whole business of what was going on in France at that time, and the conceptual changes that were occurring. Also wanted to do a big shout out to Voltaire, the idea of Voltaire, which I've been reading about through a novel, actually, and it's been a very, very good experience for me, because it's made me think about that period in terms of the shift. Now, so today I've been talking about several shifts. One is that one. Another one is the shift from pre to post contact in New Zealand, and the third one is the shift that we're looking at now. And thanks very much, everybody, for getting back to me. And I'm very, very happy to do video conferences such as the one with Paul Moon just before this Books and Books episode, with anybody, really, who wants to talk about these particular things, because they are so important. You're with Peter Cleve.